Hi everyone, this is WWD 9 and you're most welcome for it. On WWD 3, we talked about the measures of central tendency and we talked more about the advantages, the limitations, and the situations where you need to use each of them. Today we want to talk about how we can calculate the median in Excel, most especially calculating the median with conditions. Like for example, here I have a dataset that is showing sales per regions. We want to calculate the median not for the entire dataset, but only for those records that belongs to the eastern region. That's calculating the median with one condition. And also we want to calculate the median for only the records that belongs to eastern region and the sales is greater than $12,000. That's calculating the median with multiple conditions, for our case here with two conditions. Now if you haven't watched WWD 3 video, I recommend that you go and watch that video because certain things we talked about in that video, we are not going to talk about it in this video. In this video, we are going to focus on how we can calculate median in Excel. I'm also going to leave a link to that video in the description of this video, and also at the end of this video, I'm going to leave a link to that video. Let's switch on to Excel and we dive deeper into how we can calculate the median in Excel. Now, as I've already told you, median is one of the measures of central tendency, and it is used when the dataset has outliers, that is the extreme values. Like for example, we have this $1,000 which is way greater than the rest of the values in this dataset. That makes this $1,000 an outlier. On situations like that one where the dataset is having outliers, that's when the median is used. Now, the biggest disadvantage of median is that it doesn't use all the values in the dataset. It simply uses the value which is at the middle of your dataset. We talked more about that on WWD 3 video. You can watch that video, then you find out more about that. But now let's see how we can calculate the median in Excel. Now we have this pupils pocket money example. This is the very example we saw on WWD 3. Now before I calculate the median, I want us to compare the median and the mean. Let's start by calculating the mean. So I'm going to click on this cell, equals to average. This function is calculate the arithmetic mean. So I'm going to hit tab to select it. I'm simply going to highlight the values for term 1. When I control enter, copy my formula to this side. The mean pocket money for term 1 is $15 and for term 2 is $211. Let's also calculate the median and we see if there's going to be a difference. So I'm going to click on this cell and do equals to. Now in Excel we also have the median function. As you can see, it's the median and it says returns the median or the number in the middle of the set of the given numbers. When you see it highlighted in blue, I'm going to hit tab to select it. It simply needs number 1, number 2, number 3, just like that. But I'm simply going to highlight the values like this. When I control enter, you can see for term 1, the mean pocket money and the median pocket money is the same, $15. But when I copy my formula to the side, because we have this outlier on our dataset, since the mean uses all the data points in your dataset, we are getting a bigger mean than the median. Now let's scroll down and we get to our second example. Now, this is the hotel price per night example that we also saw last video. Let's also see how we can calculate the median using Excel. So I'm going to click on this cell. If you remember very well, the median was $106. So let's see whether Excel is going to give us the same median. So I'm going to do equals to median, tab to select it. So I'm going to highlight the entire data set. When I hit enter, you can see we are getting $106. Now the two examples we saw, this first example here and this second example here, we calculated the median without any condition. Let's scroll down and we see how we can calculate the median with conditions. Now, as we saw at the beginning of the video, we want to calculate the median not for the entire records like we did above, but only for those records that belongs to the eastern region. So I'm going to click on this cell. In order for us to calculate the median with condition, we need to nest the if function inside the median function. Now before we do that, let me just show you how the if function works. I'm going to click on this cell and do equals to if. When I see it highlighted in blue, I'm going to hit tab to select it. The if function has three arguments: the logical test, the value if true, and the value if false. Now for the logical test, we are going to check if this value here is actually equals to eastern. Now if the value here is the same as this value, the logical test will result to true. But if the value here is actually not the same as the value here, the logical test will result to false. That's why you need to give the if function the value if true, the value you want if this logical test is true, or the value you want if the logical test is false. Now I'm going to copy this formula down a few more cells. So I'm going to lock this value here. So I'm going to hit the F4 key to lock it. Now when I type comma to go to the value if true, we're going to tell the if function that if the logical test is true, then give us this value. Now if you want to put something on the value if false, you can click comma, then you tell the if function what it should give you if the logical test is false. But guess what? If you leave out that last argument, the if function is actually programmed to put for you false. So I'm going to backspace and leave that last argument out. Close my bracket. When I control enter, you can see for the first one, here is northern and here is distant. It's telling us it's false. But if I'm to copy my formula down, you can see for this particular case here, this is eastern, which is equal to this one. Since the logical test here is true, it's actually giving us the value or the sales in this cell. So we're going to use the if function just to filter out the conditions that we want. Then we shall get the median of what the if function has actually resulted to. So I'm going to click on this cell and do equals to. Let's start by filtering out using the if function. Tap to select it. For the logical test here, we did one at a time and we copied our formula down. But for our case here, I'm going to do an array operation. So I'm going to highlight the entire region column. So anytime that value is equals to eastern. So that's going to be our logical test. So I'm going to click comma. Now for the value if true, we want the sales. So I'm going to highlight the sales column and then comma. Now for the value if false, you can put something there, but for me I'm going to leave it out. Excel will actually put for me false whenever the value is false. So I'm going to close my bracket. Now right now, if I'm to highlight just the if function and evaluate it using the F9 key, you can see whenever the logical test is true, it's actually giving me the value for sales. Like for example, the first one is eastern and the value is $10,740. That's why you can see this value is here. Also the second one is true. That's why it's giving me the sales. Then whenever you're seeing false here, that means the logical test is also false. I'm going to control Z to undo that. You can see the if function has actually filtered out for us the sales for those records that's from the eastern region. We simply need to put the entire if function inside the median. So I'm going to click at the beginning and do median, tap to select it. So for the number, everything in the if function is going to be our number. So I'm simply going to go to the end, close bracket. So that means I'm getting the median of only the filtered data. So the median function will only use the values and leave out the false that the if function is giving us, and it will get for me the median for the values that the if function is actually giving it. So I'm going to control enter. You can see the median for the records from the eastern region is actually $11,520. Now what I've done, I've actually color coded all the eastern records using this orange color, as you can see. And if you pull out all those records, these are the sales for those records. Now there are actually 6 records. That means that's an even number. For us to calculate the median, we need to first rearrange it in ascending order or descending order. Since it's an even number, we now need to get the mean of the 2 middle values that will give us the median. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to come to this cell and do equals to average, tab to select it. Then I'm going to get the average for only these 2 middle values here, or 2 middle numbers. When I hit tab, you can see the median for these records I've pulled out is actually the same as the median that we got when we used the if function and the median function. That means it actually worked very well. That one we were calculating it using only one condition. This time around we want to get the median for records that belongs to eastern region and the sales are greater than $12,000. So I'm going to click on this cell. Again, we need to first filter it out using the if function. So I'm going to do equals to if, tab to select it. Now, if you have multiple conditions, you need to put all those conditions on the logical test. So I'm going to do for the first logical test, I'm going to test whether anything in the region is actually equals to eastern. That is my first logical test. Now, let me first put it in bracket. So I'm going to put it in bracket. Now I'm going to do an AND logical test. So I'm going to multiply it times, open bracket. The second condition now, or the second logical test is going to be if anything in the sales is actually greater than $12,000. Close my bracket. Now let me first prove to you what this is going to give us. Let's first highlight only this part here and we see what it's going to give us. Now I'm using Office 365, that's why you can see it's popping on top here. But if you're not using Office 365, you need to hit the F9 key to evaluate it. Now you can see we are having trues, false, false, trues, false, false, series of trues and falses. So when I control Z, when I also highlight the second logical test and hit the F9 key, you can also see we're having a series of truths and falses on that logical test. So I'm going to control Z. Now, in Excel, 1 actually means true and 0 actually means false. That means whenever we are seeing true on the first logical test, Excel is actually going to replace it with 1. And whenever we are seeing true on the second logical test, Excel is also going to replace it with 1. So it's like we are getting 1 from this first logical test, then we multiply it times a 1 in the second logical test, and that will also give us 1, which is actually true. So if I highlight the entire logical test we have here and hit the F9 key, you can see we're getting 1 and 0. That means whenever you're seeing 1 here, it means on the first logical test it was true, then times the second logical test which was true also, that is 1. So 1 times 1 is 1. But if the first logical test is true and the second logical test is false, that will be 1 times 0, and that will give me 0. That's why we are seeing 1 and zeros. So I'm going to control Z to undo that. Let me first scroll this one up. So the entire logical test we have done here is actually sitting on the logical test argument of the if function. So I'm going to come to the end, comma, to go to the value if true. Now for the value if true, we want the sales to be put there. So I'm going to highlight the sales column. Now I'm going to leave out the value if false. So I'm going to close my bracket. Now, just to prove before I enter this, let me first highlight for you just this and hit the F9 key. You can see whenever we have the Eastern region and the sales is greater than $12,000, we are getting the sales there. But whenever the two logical tests gave us false, Excel has actually put for us the false in. So I'm going to control Z to undo that. So that means we have already filtered out the data that we want using the two conditions. We can now put the filtered results inside the median function. So I'm going to come to the end, do median, tab. So the number is going to be the results that the if function has filtered out for us. So I'm going to go to the end and close my bracket. Now there's something I forgot to tell you on the first example here. But now if you're using Office 365, you simply need to hit enter. But if you're not using Office 365, that's something I forgot to tell you here. You need to use Control, Shift and enter. That's because what we are doing here is actually an array operation. So you need to hit Control, Shift and enter if you are entering it, and you need to check the formula bar to see the curly bracket being put at the beginning of the formula and at the end of the formula, in order for you to prove that what you have done is actually an array operation. But if I hit the F2 key to put it in edit mode, if you have Office 365 like me, you can simply hit enter and it will work very well. If I click on here, you can see there is no curly bracket to show that what I've done is actually an array operation, but it's giving me the correct answer. So that's how you can actually get the median with conditions. Yeah, that is it for this video. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. And if you found this video interesting, give it a like, then you share it with your friends. This is a video where we talked about the measures of central tendency. You can click on it, then you go and watch it. Until next video, WWD 10, then we meet again. Thank you.